Very good. We will call to order the Planning Commission meeting here for Wednesday, August 16th, 2023 in Council Chambers. And first item on our agenda is to call the roll, and I'm kind of slowing down.
Can I make it?
James.
Duval.
Duval. He called you.
Excuse me. Present.
Gorham.
There we go.
Oh, here.
Grunenwald.
Here.
Marone. Norwood.
Here.
Stangline.
Here.
Yeager.
Yes. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Item number item number 4 is an approval of our agenda. Do we have a motion to approve or any changes, amendments, or adjustments?
Motion to approve the agenda?
Got a motion to approve. Is there a second? And
Second, Marwood.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Very good. Okay. Approval of the minutes. This is item number 5. Is in your packet. Anyone want to take a run at that one?
So move to approve the minutes.
Got a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
And a second. Any other discussion on the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And we got an approval of our minutes. We'll move on to item 6. This is the category of 6. This is our new business. Item 6A, as you may have noticed, was removed from our agenda tonight. So we will move on to item 6B. This is the consideration of a variance request for, a variance request for an accessory structure at 11617 Andrew Street. James, would you please give us kind of the rundown on this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Don Booth, on behalf of Buku, has submitted a variance request for the construction of an accessory structure to be used as a vocational training facility at 11617 Andrew Street. The proposed accessory structure would exceed the maximum allowed square footage of accessory structures on the property. So this property is currently located in the general commercial zoning district, which allows for one accessory structure with a maximum size of 500 square feet. The applicant is proposing a 60 by 100 foot structure for the facility, which would equate to 6,000 square feet. So with this, according to section 515-4, variances should only be permitted when they are in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the ordinance. So with this in the findings, staff does see the purpose of the general zoning district is to allow for more intensive commercial uses that require the primary street network and access and circulation. The general purpose of allowing one structure in the general commercial zoning district, this kind of goes back to the formation of the new zoning code, were considerations to not allow for the construction of large storage and warehousing facilities along some of our main corridors, and creating or needing this to essentially be attached. The proposed use of the accessory structure would be for a trade school, which is a permitted use in the GC district. So number 2, when variances are consistent with the comprehensive plan, staff did list out, I believe, 2 or 3 cases on how it's supported by the comprehensive plan. Economic development goal 1, support infill and redevelopment through Brainerd as a strategic component of growth. Policy 1, drive infill development and redevelopment towards areas where current infrastructure is present or where places where high levels of blight or disinvestment exist. This property, before Mr. Booth had purchased it, certainly did have issues with blight, as well as potential other code issues. Also, this property is located next to infrastructure, so there are utilities that would be able to be connected to for the proposed training facility. Variances may be granted when the applicant for the variances established there are practical difficulties in complying with the zoning ordinance. The accessory structure must exceed 500 square feet in order to properly operate as a non-destructive testing school. Also, as discussed with the applicant, and he may be able to elaborate on this, there were concerns about actually connecting to the building since it was an older foundation and how that would interact between the two buildings if they were to be connected. Number 4, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner. When you do look at the GIS map of this, there are significant wetlands to the south of it, which do make it more difficult to place a structure to the south. Also, the proposed location is ideal for construction because of the location of utilities. Next, the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. The construction of the proposed accessory structure will be similar to neighboring properties based on the exterior buildings and building size. The material that proposed to use would also conform to the design standards of the general commercial zoning district. And just as a reminder, economic considerations alone cannot be used for variances. Staff does recommend approval of variance request for the construction of the accessory structure at 11617 Andrew Street in the location presented by the applicant. The applicant is here if you do have any questions, and I can certainly take questions as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kramvik. Does anyone have any questions for staff? No? Okay, very good. So we have a few guests here tonight. I just kind of want to give you an idea of how the public hearing portion will work on these. Generally, what we do is just what played out here. We'll get just kind of a rundown from our city staff, and then we'll ask if we have any questions for staff, and then we will open the public hearing, which will give the opportunity for the applicant to come forward, talk about their project. You certainly don't have to, especially with as thorough as James tends to be. A lot of times he kind of covers it. Once the applicant has had an opportunity to speak, we will then ask for anybody else that would like to speak on this particular variance request, and then we will generally follow up if we have any follow-up questions for the applicant, and then we will close the public hearing, and then generally it's brought back to us to make to kind of discuss and talk through what we have. So. If you're here and you would like to talk on either this issue or any of the others, just remember we have the applicant up first, and then everyone else gets a chance to talk who would like to. And if you do come up, just remember we need your name. You gotta come up here. We'll make sure that the microphone's on for you. Need your name and your address, and we'll hear what you have to say. Okay. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing at 8:16, and I'm going to give the applicant an opportunity to come up if you like, and just kind of talk about your project a little bit, please.
Okay, hello, Don Booth. I'm the owner of the American Institute of Non-Destructive Testing. I don't know if you know my company, but we've been in town 10 years, been building, growing, investing. We bought the hotel south of town, south of the old Holiday Inn. It was a Roadway Inn or something. Pretty run down when I bought it. We've put about $250,000 into it. We're renovating it. We're putting a new roof, new siding, and now. In 2012, I had this vision of the first school in the world like it to have housing in a facility right next door. So finally, after 11, 12 years, you get there, right, after all the hard work. We bought the housing during the pandemic. I guess it's a good time to buy a rundown hotel because it wasn't much in use. And then now we've moved our offices over there. We're moving everything from Baxter into the Brainerd district. And we want to put our training facility. To try to hook it up to our building, we lose study rooms, we lose housing by connecting it and tearing a hole in the wall, right? So it's, to us, that's like gold. It's hard enough to only have like 24 rooms to grow into over the next so many years. Investing probably $1.4 million into that area of the town, revitalizing it, creating jobs, and bringing people from all over the world. I've got my vice president and my instructor here, my lead instructor. We have people all the way from Norway here to this week that flew all the way from Norway just for our training facility. So we're bringing in people from Lockheed Martin, Boeing, SpaceX, Blue Origin, NASA, people all over the world. So I think it'll be a great addition to the community. It's going to be a beautiful building. And I think James described it best, that it's going to look great out there and serve a purpose. It's not just a big storage building.
Gotcha.
Right. So
fantastic.
Anyway,
fantastic.
Right,
thanks for your time. Just one sec here. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Please, yes.
Mr. Booth, thanks for coming here tonight. I'm not familiar with your business in the past, but it sounds like a pretty cool thing. Destructive testing is probably pretty fun too. We probably can't.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate, you know, bringing that kind of a business to Brainerd. I'm curious as to your timeline. What are you thinking about for a timeline of getting this up and running?
Well, we have everything in place except this approval. So, I mean, if we could get approval, we have people ready to start doing dirt work. We have the utility pole in. James knows, you know, what our plans are. We have engineered drawings. We have everything ready. So it would break ground and probably be done in 90 days or before winter anyway. We're hoping to have it by the end of the year because we have classes in November, but I just don't think we're going to get them in there by then. But we have another big class in January. And I do own a 21,000 square foot facility in Baxter where I've been holding all these training, but we're moving everything out of Baxter into Brainerd, into the housing, so.
So you're kind of right now.
We're ready, you know, we're ready to break ground.
You're ready, and you're also sort of in this in-between state, right? Where
Yeah.
You got a footprint in both locations. You're trying to.
Yeah, we're
bring
trying
everything
to get
together.
out of there so I can lease that and right, you know, and just keep moving and growing and changing. Right now, we've pulled permits and been approved. We're putting a new roof on that hotel now and new siding. So, you know, that's about a $350,000 into the old hotel.
Yeah.
Now it's going to be a beautiful structure with offices and people and jobs and everything. But yeah, we're ready. We're ready when and if this is approved.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Follow-up. And what would a 30-day or 1-month delay in getting your approval, how fatal is that to your plan if
Yeah, it just depends on weather and
right?
you know, contractors, and then all of a sudden contractors get busy, and then it rolls into next year, and they're like, hey, we got to get a different job going, right? So it could be fatal. I don't know if it would be. I mean, fatal, that's a strong word, I guess. But, you know, small business, I am a small business, even though we do business all over the world. And if I don't know, you know, how many people here own businesses or have or been entrepreneurs, but it's tough some days, right? Things got to fall in place, right? So fatal, I don't know. It might push it off till next year and then change. That would change a lot of financing and investing and hiring new people and stuff like that. So,
Everything is connected. So
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Booth.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our applicant? Okay, thank you very much
Thanks.
for coming up. And at this time, we'll ask if anyone else is in the audience and would like to speak on this matter. We certainly would allow you a few minutes to be heard if you do. Otherwise, if not, not seeing anyone motioning that they'd like to come up. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and close this public hearing, 6:13, and then we're going to bring it back to us for discussion. So if we have any questions for staff or want to discuss amongst ourselves, now's the time.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Maybe question for staff if we may continue to
Absolutely.
burr down a little bit. So we're being asked to approve a variance to allow us a structure, an accessory structure, if you would. Are there alternative ways of getting at the end result that the applicant is trying to accomplish here, which is to be able to build a classroom facility in adjacent to or whatever to this lodging facility?
So a couple other options were given to the applicant, you know, either connecting, you know, couldn't be just solely a walkway between the buildings. Obviously, it sounds like there's issues with removing some of the spaces needed within the existing building, but some type of connection that would serve for some extra storage or and a walkway to actually connect the building. That was provided, less than ideal for the applicant. Also did talk with the applicant about the PUD process, which would allow for two buildings on a property. Currently, right now, if you have two property, or if you have two buildings of this size, you could potentially consider them both primary structures through the PUD process, and then allow it based on the PUD conditions. That process would take, probably at a minimum of 3 months to complete a PUD process. So those were the kind of the options. There was an option to potentially have it south of the property, but, access isn't great there. The wetlands aren't great to the south of it. Administrative boundary line adjustment probably could have been done to make it work on a single property. But again, there's the considerations for the wetlands and utilities to the south of it.
And follow up, Mr. Chair. So does our zoning ordinance allow for this type of development?
So I believe it could either, it could certainly be considered accessory to the main offices and the accommodations, especially since that building is roughly, I think, 19,000 square feet. So this, certainly would be significantly smaller. I believe in the old code, it did allow for 30% of the gross floor area. Obviously, the new code we changed to either have connected buildings, and certainly didn't want to see large storage buildings built in the general commercial area. So I think it could be considered an accessory building. You could also look at it through a PUD and essentially create two buildings on the property as well.
So the ordinance allows, is able to accommodate this type of a development request without the need for a variance.
Potentially a PUD could if recommended approval by the Planning Commission and approved by City Council.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, thoughts, discussions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
I would just opine to say that this is a great opportunity to turn around a property that needs attention. It's needed attention for a long time. I'm in favor of the variance.
Very good. Thank you, Don.
Find out more about the business. Sounds kind of fascinating. If you need an X-ray of something, let me know.
Anyone else? Were you making a motion or? Well, please go ahead then. Yep.
Please.
Yes.
One of the challenges of this proposal is that, our findings of fact to support a variance, we have this checklist of questions, and these are not only part of our ordinance, but they're also part of state statute. So these are, in a sense, transferred from state statute on overriding or addressing the issuance of variances and clarifying some problems that were in the past. The challenge that I see here is the key language in our finding of fact number 7, that a variance may be granted when the applicant for the variance establishes there are practical difficulties in complying with the zoning ordinance. And we have avenues in our ordinance that would allow this kind of development to occur without the issuance of a variance, which to me then says that we cannot satisfy the criteria in that particular portion of the choice. It rings all the bells in the economic development and those things, the findings of fact supporting where it fits in our comprehensive plan. It's in harmony with the neighborhood. The challenge I have is this very key piece here. And when I look at the findings of fact as presented by staff to support this, they really are essentially economic considerations, and there isn't additional supporting evidence that would say that there are other factors. So even 7C, economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. And so I see two places here where I'm troubled that we can't satisfy the criteria, and as such, I can't support making a decision on the issuance of a variance. So share that perspective here, and I'm concerned that we don't have the basis to be able to act on this variance because it doesn't satisfy the criteria in the ordinance nor state statute.
Very good, thank you. Any other discussion here? I have a couple things I'll chime in on. James, anything? No? Okay. So when I first saw this come across, my mind went directly to what is the easiest way to connect this to the main structure. So I'm a little fuzzy when I read through exactly what meets the terminology of a connected structure. So I noticed that when I saw the site plan that we have the building kind of sitting partially behind the other building. We got a door kind of coming in what appears from the drawings, a door coming in from what I believe is the roadside and then also on the building side. Does that sound right, James? So my leaning here is it's not a huge distance in between. I totally understand the idea of when you build a new building next to an old building, you don't want to underdig. There's all kinds of issues with digging too close and that type of work. I understand that. But my mind was going towards how easily could we satisfy this being not an accessory structure, but being an addition, which could then just be effectively given over the counter, correct, James? So could you just maybe, where I'm going with this is it as easy as do we do a covered roof and a connected pathway that connects to the building with a continuous roof, sheltered walk that gets you from the main building out back to this back building? James, would that get us to the area of an addition versus a separate structure?
So I've consulted with this with Hascam Consulting as well, related to our other PUD. Simply just a connected walkway, we really wouldn't constitute a connected building. But if there was some actual use in there, maybe something 12, 15 foot wide that would also, have some storage along with the walkway, at least, then there's a use associated with that connection, and it's not just simply a covered walkway. In my interpretation, then that would be considered a connected building, but not just simply a walkway.
Understood. Okay. Well, that answers my question there.
And then, when you say storage, then are we gonna have a problem with fire exit, with storing boxes in a hallway? I don't know, that's just a valid question, I think. So that would be something to consider. So a hallway wouldn't work maybe, I mean, just a hallway, sealed windows.
So what I would picture is there'd be a partition wall that would be between, there'd be doors and
Heated
storage
space
and
in
windows.
between.
Yep.
In many municipalities, the heated space definition is the connective tissue that says this is not an addition, or not a detached, but an addition. Yes, correct. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right. Well, if we have nothing else, I'll be looking for a motion on this.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
I would move to deny the variance request for proposed accessory structure for 11617 Andrews Street.
Good. We have a motion to deny the request. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion on this?
Do we need a reason on this one?
Well, I think that I'm assuming that the reason that can be given here is what was cited in, with section number 7. I guess I'm not asking you to amend your motion, but my assumption is based upon the testimony that I heard earlier, that would be the predominant factor of the impetus to your motion.
I can certainly amend my motion to
Let's do it.
specifically say that that the variance request does not meet the criteria for section 515.54B4 of the ordinance.
Very good. And does the seconder agree?
Yeah.
Very good. So we got an amended motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion on this? Okay, James, I'm going to have this voted by, we're going to take a roll call vote on this, please, James, if you would.
Okay. Duval.
And
Just for
yes.
clarification, a motion of yes is actually to deny the variance, or a vote of no is a motion against that, so.
Thank you. Yes.
Gorham.
No.
Grunenwald.
No.
Norwood.
No.
Stangline,
Yes.
Yeager.
Yes. So that puts us at 3-3, if I'm not mistaken. So what we will do with this, because we are an advisory panel, we're just going to go ahead and pass it along to the city council that we were exactly split 50-50. And James, if you will please just kind of give us a quick rundown on what's going to happen next here for the applicant.
Yep, so as Commissioner Yeager had indicated there, they're Planning Commission's an advisory committee. The final vote will be at the city council meeting on the 21st of August for an approval or denial of the variance.
Thank you. And don't feel like you have to stay. So a lot of people feel awkward that they cannot leave right after their item is up. So yes, absolutely. Thank you. All right, with that, we're going to move on to item 6C. This is the consideration of variance request for an accessory structure at 219 West Laurel Street. This can be found on page 23 in your packet. Dylan, would you please give us kind of the rundown?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair and Planning Commission members. We are here talking about a variance for 219 West Laurel Street. Our applicant, William Simon, has submitted 2 variance requests. First, the construction of a 24 by 24 garage at a 4-unit residential apartment. The proposed garage will exceed the total number of allowed accessory structures and the maximum allowed square footage. This is in a town center district as well as the Shoreland Overlay District. It is one property away from being the last westward property in the town center district once you get across the river on Laurel. So for variances, we are looking for the criteria that it is in harmony with the general purpose of the ordinance and consistent with the comprehensive plan, and that there is an established practical difficulty. We will go through each of those, but first, our particular ordinance that we're dealing with here is 515.2-11.c, Table 1, which states that the accessory structures for the Town Center zoning district has a maximum size of 500 square feet and a maximum number of accessory structures of 1. Currently at the property, there is an existing garage that is 484 square feet. The 24 by 24 additional garage would add 576 square feet to the total of accessory structure space at the property, which would be in excess of both those sections of 515-2-11.c, Table 1. So the general provisions that this and intent of the ordinance here was that we needed to encourage continuation of viable traditional downtown area, allowing retail, service, office, entertaining facilities, as well as public and semi-public uses, in addition to multifamily dwelling units. The zoning code allows for one accessory structure, maximum 500 square feet, because supports that district should be primarily retail, service, and office buildings as opposed to storage buildings. However, residential units would normally consider underground garages or first-story tuck-under parking to be in harmony. That isn't necessarily possible in this parcel. We also have that dwelling units should include at minimum one enclosed garage stall and have a minimum dimensions of 12 by 20 feet for each dwelling unit without a basement, and a minimum of one stall 16 to 20 feet without that basement. And proposed additional garages would provide dwelling units with that space, bringing the building actually into conformance with our garage code in section 515-4-2. As you can see in the document of our findings of fact, we found at least 3 areas where we have alignment with our comprehensive plan. Land use goal 3, supporting investment and incremental enhancements of quality of life. Housing goal 1, providing a diverse mix of housing choices for all stages of life, income range, ownership, and rental property, particularly policy 3 on each of those. Variances may be granted when the applicant for the variance establishes that there are practical difficulties. In this situation, the practical difficulty is topographical. There is an 8-foot drop from the front to the rear of the property, which makes it difficult to attach or place a structure in a different location. So building onto the garage that is already there is not particularly possible because of the topography of the lot, as well as building in certain other locations on the property, such as trying to tuck under. The variance if granted would not alter the essential character of the locality, as can be seen earlier in the findings of fact. All but one of the surrounding parcels are multifamily dwelling units with mixed situations of parking. And economic considerations are not a practical difficulty in this case. The layout of the existing building and topographical challenges make this not feasible necessarily with that parcel. At this time, no party has contacted the Community Development Department with questions regarding the project, and our recommendation as staff is the approval of this variance to allow the addition of a single 24 by 24 accessory structure on the premises.
Very good. Thank you, Dylan. Any questions for staff?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Dylan, I have a question. Are we taking into consideration impervious surface in this? Does that apply in this district? And how does this change, adding the second garage, change the numbers?
Town Center has a 100%
100?
impervious
Okay.
surface limit.
And I'll add that as well. So we did have the city engineer go and take a look at it as well. Since this is in the Shoreland Overlay District, there's actually a 25% impervious requirement in here. It is not a riparian lot. We did send out notification to the local hydrologist. They did not come back with any concerns from it. When the city engineer did take a look at it, the entire area is Class 5, which is really has no pervious capabilities to it. So under the direction from the city engineer, he did not see any concerns with the stormwater runoff from the proposed garage.
Okay.
Other questions for staff?
Mr. Chair. Dylan, is this currently a licensed rental dwelling, to your knowledge?
Yes, to my knowledge, it is currently a licensed rental.
And is it currently licensed as a 4-unit?
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff? Yep.
One additional one. Will there be, the driveway right now, as I remember, is dirt. Will it continue to be dirt up to the garage, or will there be any improvements on the driveway surface?
So that'll be a part of the building permit requirements whenever there's a garage added to essentially you're expanding the use or changing the use there. We do have a requirement for pavement coming off of a paved road. So that would be part of the requirements and stipulations of the building permit. And I did make the applicant aware of that.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff? Okay, at this time, we're going to go ahead and open up the public hearing here, 6:34. I'm going to invite the applicant, if they would like to come forward. You certainly don't have to, but to give you an opportunity to speak on the variance application that is in front of us. And then, once the applicant is done, we'll have some, give us the opportunity for questions for the applicant and then anyone else who would like to speak. So at this time, if the applicant does want to come forward, they certainly can. They don't have to, certainly don't have to. Please state your name and speak into the microphone there. I think the microphone's on, right, James?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
My name is Bill Simon. My wife and I own the property at 219 West Laurel. And I guess my reasons for being here, we have a two-car garage upstairs, and I've had multiple requests from the tenants down below that they would like to have a garage. And I think for the security and convenience of them, I would like to put in a garage. Nothing major, but one lady had her car tampered with, and she made the point that if I could park it inside, I would feel more safe and secure with it. So it's kind of in a nutshell what this is all about. So
Understood. Thank you. Do you have any questions for the applicant here? Oh, nothing. Looks like you're off the hook. Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Does anyone else here that would like to speak on this? Nope, no one? Okay, very good. So what we'll do here is we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. We'll bring it back to us for discussion, questions for staff.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Looking at the ordinance, it's a little curious for an existing structure, a licensed rental unit or rental dwelling with 4 units. In our ordinance, the design standards would allocate 1 garage stall for each of those units. If this were a new build, that would be pretty easy to accommodate. Being that this is an existing structure and has been functioning in that way, it's unable to really comply with the ordinance because of a disconnect between the design standards, which say you must provide a stall of this dimension, and when you sum those up, they exceed the allowable dimensional standards in the zoning district. So you can get 3, but you can't get 4. So it's almost like, in order to comply with the need that's stated, that if it were a new building, we could figure that out. But an existing structure, you can't quite get it to fit on the site. It's just kind of a curious oddity of how we got to this point, and I can get it a little bit that you don't want to, in the town center, necessarily just cover a lot of space with accessory structures. I understand why we're sort of there, but when you couple the design standards and the dimensional standards, you can't. That's that test, if you would, of practical difficulty of complying with the ordinance. You can't get there from here, with an existing structure. So it seems to me that this feels to me like it very much meets the criteria for considering granting a variance.
Very good. Any other comments? All right, very good. I have nothing, so if there's nothing else here, we're going to go ahead and look for a motion on this.
One
Yes, please.
clarification. Is this 1 variance or 2 variants? Dylan, initially you said 2 variances, or are you just talking about 1 variance? Is that right?
It would be 2 variances, one to exceed the number of accessory structures, because only one's allowed, and the second variance would be to exceed the square footage.
Just want to know what
It's
we're.
over the square footage by a small amount, I remember right.
It'd be by quite a bit.
Oh, well, because you combine the two.
Yep, yes.
Correct. On a single unit, it'd be barely over the size,
Yep.
but as a combination, it'd be well over.
Technical question, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, absolutely. I like technical questions.
Can we take on both variances in one shot, or do we have to do one?
I think we could take on, I'm sure that one is dependent upon the other, so I would assume we would just do them in one shot.
Is the formality whether we do or not?
Is it, would you like
Yep,
them
it can be
separate?
done all at
Very
once.
good.
All right, all right. Mr. Chair?
Yes,
I'd
please.
like to make a motion to approve the 2 variances, citing the reasons in the packet there that were so well put out by Dylan there. And yes.
Very good. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, Duval.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Dylan, please, would you let our applicant know what the next steps are?
All right. So the next steps here, this variance will go before the City Council at the next meeting on August 21st, where it will be considered by the full council. Upon passage at that point, we'll be able to go fully ahead with the permit.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to item 6D. This is on page 31 in your packet. We are out of the world of variances and into the new and exciting world of IUPs. And this first one coming up is a request for a short-term rental at 203 Hawkins Drive. James, please give us the rundown.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Mr. Safi and Ms. Durasmo have applied with accompanying documents for one short-term rental at 203 Hawkins Drive. Short-term rentals must comply with the following minimum standards as required by Section 515-3-34 of the Zoning Code. So just a little background on this. Staff periodically does review short-term rental listings on the internet and discovered this property was operating without a rental license and an interim use permit. After discussions with the owner, this is their vacation home that they use to visit family and supplement with short-term rental reservations. Staff informed them of what would be required for compliance. The rental license has been issued for the property and has been inspected by both the housing inspector and fire marshal. Staff requested that the property owner block out all remaining scheduling dates until a determination has been made by the city council for the requested interim use permit for the short-term rental. So just a few of the house rules and essentially dimensions of the house. The proposed short-term rental unit is 2,079 square feet in size and has 3 bedrooms. Based on the bedroom sizes, the occupancy it would be set at 8 guests. There are 4 off-street parking spaces allocated to the guests, 2 of them in the driveway as well as 2 of them in the attached garage. The only accessory structures available for guest usage is the attached garage and the dock installed on the Mississippi River. The applicants have retained the services of Tom Jacobson as a responsible party for this rental unit as he resides within 50 miles of the premise. The short-term rentals rules and the house rules did indicate a 11 p.m. quiet time. City of Brainerd Code has 10 p.m. for quiet time, so is something that's in our recommendation to be adjusted. We also did not see any rules for pets. The City of Brainerd does have a requirement that no more than a combination of 4 dogs and cats are allowed at any premise in the City of Brainerd, so that would have to be added if pets are allowed on the property. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the interim use permit for one short-term rental at 203 Hawkins Drive, as they have met all the conditions of the zoning code section. But with the following conditions, the applicant includes a limit on pets that conforms to city code. No person shall keep, maintain, or otherwise house more than a total of 4 cats or dogs within any household in the City of Brainerd. The applicant restricts the quiet hours after 10 p.m. in accordance with city ordinances. The applicant clearly defines occupancy limit for the property not to exceed 8 guests or a number set by the building official upon review. Submittal of the local option sales tax form to the finance department. And then lastly, upon sale or transfer of the property, the interim use permit for a short-term rental at 203 Hawkins Drive, it would be no longer valid. With that, I can certainly answer any other questions. I believe the applicant may be online as well.
Very good. Yes. Any questions for staff here? Yes, please.
Sure, thank you. Director Fromvik, is this property currently in violation as of today? Would the mayor be able to book a room? Is the question I'm asking.
Everything is blocked out at this point.
So from what you can tell from the online reservation tools, this is not a property that's available at this time, and
That's correct.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
How long do we believe it operated as a short-term rental before it was identified?
So we saw it in the springtime. So getting the rental license, kind of the first step, and then working through the application process. So, I don't know how long it was operating before then, but we did check in the spring.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff? Okay, so at this time, I'm just going to go ahead and open up the public hearing here. We've got our applicant online. Certainly like to invite you to speak if you would like to do so. Does we need to push any buttons to do that?
Sean's
No.
got it.
All right, Sean's got you. So I think we can hear you loud and clear. If you would like to speak, please go right ahead. Just let us know your name and all that good stuff, and we'll hear what you have to say.
Hey, good evening, council. My name is Bob Safai. I'm the owner of the Airbnb along with my wife. We do not allow pets at all in our Airbnb, actually. We really want to maintain the property because we really bought it for our own use. Our family has their lake house in Deerwood. My uncle is in Ironton. My cousins, they all live in Aiken. So we come there to vacation. We bring our sons there. We go fish there. It's really just something that we're doing so we can have our money safe somewhere and also have a vacation home for our family. We will go ahead and make sure that we do change all the requirements on Airbnb to 10 p.m. quiet time and also limit guests to 8. We want to make sure we're in accordance with the council and all the city's ordinances. And yeah, that being said, that's pretty much our situation in a nutshell.
Very good. Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant here from commission? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Just stay online here, just in case we do need to cycle back to you. At this time, I will ask if anyone else is in the gallery or in the house here that would like to speak on this interim use permit. Please, come on up. We'll take you one at a time here. Please state your name and just for sake of expediency and rapidity of our meeting, just a few minutes. Tell us what you got on your mind, what you'd like for us to hear.
First of all, thank you for inviting me. We got 2 invitations, so I figured you really needed to hear from us.
Very good.
We live in the property right next door.
Sure.
We're at 207 Hawkins Drive. It will be 34 years that we've been there come October the 4th. I should say Paul and I both are retired people, and we appreciate the house. We lived in there last week. Our granddaughter rented the place for our family. We kept some of our house and we kept some over there. Had a delightful time. The house is magnificent. Our complaint, if you want to call it a complaint, are the number of cars and the number of people who occupy the establishment. We have had as many as 13 vehicles parked along the cul-de-sac parallel. There is a fire hydrant there. In front of our house, we have a mailbox that was occupied also. And so that is a real concern on our part. In addition to that, which is even more important, is that we have between 6 and 7 children in the neighborhood that are 4 or 5 of them are preschoolers. We have no sidewalks. They do use Hawkins Drive as their playground. These cars, unfortunately, because nobody is watching them, they come down that hill like a shot out of a cannon. They come up the hill one day last week, missing my husband coming out of the garage by just a few feet. We've noticed, or I have noticed, that at supper time, there's always somebody who needs to quick go someplace and come back again. And I'm assuming they forgot something and they need to get back to cook it. There were a few items in the house that the kids came over and borrowed stuff from us, which was a convenience. Now, I will say this. Because of the water situation in Brainerd, I did go over there on Saturday and rang the bell to inform them of the water situation. They were delightful that I came. Fortunately, they already knew. I can't say anything about the house. I can't say anything about the people who come. Yes, some of them come with wrapped gifts, so apparently The signs in the house say no partying. We've had people bring cases of beer in. It's a vacation house. And what do you do on a vacation? You do party to some degree. I don't care who you are. And so it's not an objection, it's the traffic. Now, we apparently will lose the residency over and against a business district if it's a rental. So can we have a sign at the top of the hill, maybe 15 miles an hour? That would be a legality thing. Could we possibly have a policeman come down on a Saturday, which is when most of the traffic is, to just see how many cars are there? We had 14 people in our house, but only 6 stayed at the house next door, and it was delightful. My husband and I, we had 2 meals over there. No complaint at all about that. It's the traffic and the way they speed up and down the hill.
Understood.
I can't explain it any other way. Sue is a neighbor across the street from us, and she has 2 little ones. And then there's other families that have little kids. And you know, once they're hit, the horse is out of the barn.
Right.
And unless we decide to do something, and you know, even these folks, they're not there every day.
Sure.
To be able to see that.
Sure.
We have not had, Paul and I, any trouble with the noise. Be assured of that. People have been very gracious. No problem whatsoever. It's the traffic, the amount of cars, and the number of people.
Very good. Thank you so much.
any other thing
I
you need
appreciate
to
you
know,
coming up.
I'd be glad to
I
answer.
think you got it covered. So we'll,
Okay.
I'm going to let anyone else speak who would like to speak. Please, your name, and if it's kind of a repeat of exactly what we just heard, you know, keep it brief so we can
Reverend
get.
Paul Bigner.
Very good. Thank you.
Husband of this dear lady for 65 years or
Very
more.
good.
I want to just go ahead and say that. I work for Zion Lutheran Congregation. I preach regularly at area congregations. In other words, I need to leave and go out with my car. And when I work for the congregation, I go out and back my car out of the driveway, and I've nearly been creamed by somebody who was down at the foot of the cul-de-sac and blasted up the hill. I don't know what the speed was, but I came very close to having my rear end of my car wiped out. And I looked, and I didn't see him. And I would just want to say what my wife said. Way too many cars and a terrible amount of speed for the limited road. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Please, yes, come on up.
It'll be quick.
Okay, very good. No problem.
My
Yeah.
name is Susie
We're
Kelly.
here to-
and
we're here
I
to
live-
listen. Yeah.
live across the street from Paul and Joan. I've been there for 12 years. I'm a renter. I live in a rental unit there. And it's been a nice, quiet street. I have actually 4 grandchildren. I watch quite a bit, and they do use the street because it hasn't been very busy, and they are able to go out in their little motorized cars and bikes and whatever. But it's just, if we could get like a speed limit sign and a children at play sign or something, it would just help immensely if we could get something like that passed to put on that road. That's all I have.
Very good. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Okay, I don't think we have anyone else online other than the original applicant, so at this time, I'm just going to ask the commission if we have any questions for the applicant following up, or questions for anyone who may have had testimony. Yes, please, Mr. Duval.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify what I thought I heard was that you were able to, your party was able to rent that house within the past week. Did I understand you?
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thank you. And then if I can follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
James, is that consistent with your request to the property owner to block out time? Was that, time-wise, is that consistent?
So yeah, so we weren't asking them to, you know, cancel their reservations, but we did ask them to block out, you know, for no future reservations.
Good. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions for the applicant while we have him here? Okay, hearing, without any further questions, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing now, bring it back to us for discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
We had discussions at our July meeting about the appropriateness, and we didn't, well, it wasn't really discussions. We touched on the appropriateness of putting the time-bound restriction on the permit beyond simply whenever the property exchanges hands. And I think that's an appropriate condition to put on any of our interim use permits, particularly this use is not terribly different, that it can be renewed. If we think about the actions that this commission took for the warming shelter, we said, let's test the waters, right? And we said, let's give it a go for a year, we'll see how it goes. And we renewed that permit again. And so the interim use permit is a beneficial tool to kind of just make sure that we don't overextend ourselves in that difficult conditions. I mean, if there is an ongoing traffic issue that jeopardizes the neighborhood's children or being able to just safely exit your property to get onto the right-of-way, those can be factors that could be addressed at the renewal process, and that would be something that if our city police department provides periodic patrols in there and finds issues, that's findings of fact that would have bearing on renewing the permit. So I would be advocating that we apply an additional time-bound element to this interim use permit, and I would suggest that it would expire on December 31st, 2025, or upon sale or transfer of the property. So there's a 2-year period that the applicant's able to operate this in the short-term rental and achieve their goals and their desires, and at the same time, it comes back here for review again and future action. So that would be my recommendation, is that we would modify the staff recommendation 5 to be that the permit would expire on December 31st, 2025, or upon sale, and the remainder of the language.
Yep. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Vall. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
When I hear the concerns of the residents, they're real, and I do appreciate them. I think this is why we need to have this property licensed, and I'm glad it is licensed now, so the ongoing things can be monitored by the city. That's very important. I think a lot of the issues that you're mentioning will be, they're relevant to the discussion we're going to have later about short-term rentals in general. And where I think there are some concerns, because I think the people who are using a property as a B&B simply are not invested in a neighborhood the way you folks are invested in your neighborhood. So that'll be for a later discussion. As far as the interim use that we're looking at here, I agree with Commissioner Duvall, the idea that to tie it to 12/31/25, put a limit on it, and then we can come back and look at it. So those are my thoughts on the issue.
Good. Anyone else?
May I ask them?
No, I'm sorry. I closed the public hearing, but I think we basically got the gist
I
of.
just wondered, will they be affected by this though?
Yeah, absolutely. Once, if any action is taken, there will absolutely, everyone who's a participant in this will be affected. So, okay. Any other discussion? All right. James, sorry. Did you motion?
I did.
It was very.
It was
Okay, so I'll go like this. James? Okay.
Thanks.
James? Yes.
Mr. President, is there, question for staff, is there oftentimes a vehicle limit or maximum that we see per, within the dwelling unit per bed?
I don't know what those stats are, but certainly, as a condition here, you could condition, X number of vehicles at the property as a potential condition. There aren't really stats on how many vehicles per dwelling unit would be, I guess, standard.
As to address parking and vehicle traffic, it's I'm potentially suggesting that a condition might be no more than 2 on-street vehicles, in addition to whatever may be in the garage or in the driveway of the structure. And so it would be a limit. There's also already we're looking at the idea of a limit to 8 individuals within the structure. So
James, is that something that we can attach as conditions? That
Yep, because certainly could attach conditions to protect the neighboring properties.
Very good. Anyone else? Okay. Well, we're at that time, guys. Someone wants to take a crack at this.
I'll make a motion to grant the IUP with the attached conditions and an additional condition for closure date of December 31st, 2025, and then an additional condition of no more than 2 on-street parking for vehicles associated with the IUP.
Got a question, James, on that?
Maybe the wording should be recommend approval rather than grant.
Okay, I recommend the approval. Advisory committee.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for recommendation of approval with
New guy.
with notations added. Any other further discussion on this?
Here's my question, kind of a technical, maybe I'm sort of nitpicking, but let's say they get reported for having 3 cars. I mean, do we pull the license for having 3 cars there? I tend to think there's a lot of off-street parking available in Hawkins. And so I wonder why we're kind of being so tight on that, but that's just a question. Yes?
Mr. President, if I may, within the condition, it will be stated within the House rules for the listing, and that's the only reason why that I say of applying that specific condition. It's oftentimes when renting, they take any municipal. I've rented plenty of Airbnbs that tell me that I have to be quiet by 10 o'clock. And so it's a fairly blanket, so it's just applying it to the house rules so that way their guests know. Whether or not the enforcement of it, that's going to be difficult, but.
I'm highly skeptical of future enforcement on having 3 cars there, but that's.
Well, if I may, I think that when this comes back up for review at our date, we may not be able to enforce it with a high degree of rapidity at the time that it's happening, but we're going to certainly hear about it if there's something, and I would think that if there are complaints that are generated for either traffic or violations of this, it seems like we have a couple of the active parties in the House that are hearing what we're saying for the House rules here. I think we're going to hear about it. And when it comes back up in front of us, that's the whole idea of having a date of which we could reel it back in a little bit or make changes and so forth. So I agree. Enforcement's always a challenge. But one of the issues that I have with this with traffic is I heard that traffic was more robust, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's illegal, right? It's legal to park on the street, whether you have a birthday party and have 17 people over for one day, or whether they have it for one day. There's a difference between density and illegal activity. So I didn't really, So anyways, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right. Let's do this one by roll call, just to make sure here. James, please, if you would. Sorry, sprung it on you.
Duval,
Yes.
Gorham,
Yes.
Grunenwald,
Yes.
Norwood,
Yes.
Stangline,
Yes.
Yeager.
Yes. Okay, sorry, I made us do that by roll call, guys. Okay, motion carries. If you will please inform the applicant again of what the next steps are. Applicants here, I'm sure you heard what we have. We'll kind of get you an update of that in writing as well of what the findings were here and the satisfaction of this IUP. Please, James.
Yes, thank you. So the Planning Commission, again, advisory body, make recommendations to the City Council. City Council will hear this request at their August 21st meeting for approval or denial of the interim use permit.
Thank you. And thank you to the applicant for being here. I appreciate it. and for everyone who joined in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, all right, we're going to move on to some unfinished business now. Here's an exciting one. This shouldn't take very long. This is item 7A. This is our discussion on short-term rentals. James, please give us the Cliff Notes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So staff is recommending, I think we kind of separate this into potentially 2 or 3 kind of different talking points. First is looking at to see if the staff did attach the section in the allowed use section of the zoning code for the Planning Commission to review. If there's anything that the Planning Commission would like to review or change as part of our existing ordinance, I think this would be the time to discuss it. This was updated as part of the 2022 update. Staff did look at kind of the conditions of section 34 of the allowed use section. We took a look at different ordinances, the county one to create kind of a cohesive zoning ordinance with what other entities in the area are doing. Also took away in the past code, homeowner occupied short-term rental units used to not require an interim use permit. That got taken away with the new code. So essentially right now, all short-term rentals are interim use permits. Also added the town center, Main Street, and the kind of the TN2 district, which used to be the B2 district, to short-term rentals as well. So those are a couple of the tweaks that were made in the last zoning code update. So I guess we'll start with that and then go from there.
Very good. Thank you, James. So as you all know, I'm a fan of breaking big conversations down into little parts. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to break this into kind of 3 parts. Our current ordinance, what it says. We're going to look at the other neighboring cities' ordinances. That'll be part 2. And then number 3 will be the new and exciting stage of everyone's other ideas that weren't either in our ordinance or in a neighboring town that maybe we don't even have in front of us to consider. So James, real quickly, walk us through the current ordinance. Just get us up to speed on that. Then we're going to have any questions on our current ordinance. Then we'll move on to other ordinances.
Yep, so current ordinance, we look at occupancy, we make sure they have a rental license. We do list out, so one of the changes that we made, it used to just reference, it had to abide by city code for, say, vehicles, garbage, noise, pets. We put that right into the code so people could easily see it and take a look at that. Also talks about not using like campers as accessory structures, requiring, so our city has taxes short-term rentals as well, so it's a requirement to submit tax information to the finance department. Required to be hooked up to the one change from staff's perspective that we could look at, there's a requirement to be hooked up to city sewer and water. You know, there's potential if there's lake homes or such that may have well and septic, as long as there's compliance for the septic, that I think could potentially be a change to make in there, but Planning Commission can discuss that. I'd say those are probably the main things. We're looking at occupancy level, bedroom sizes. Typical submittals that we ask them are for the house rules, bedroom sizes. If we can get a floor plan, that's kind of even better. And then really them filling out the application. So those are the things that we require for submittals at this time.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Anybody have any questions on just that portion, our current ordinances regarding STRs?
I'm gonna try and make this related.
Okay. We have some craftsmanship. We have some language shift that is going to happen.
James, just to your point about number 7, they connected to city sewer and water. I'm trying to think of how the county's been handling this. Is this kind of consistent with the county? Because that's one of the real points of interest there, or concern on the lakes, is overburdening a septic system, right? And
so actually, I'm looking at it. I think that may have been actually a late term addition. A valid septic system certificate of compliance is required at the time of the rental license issuance. So that is in there.
Yeah, but at the same time, if it's, I'm trying to recall the term of the certificate, but I mean, if the tank is plumb full, and you've got a certificate, there's that companion piece about maybe that, when was it last pumped out? Because you can imagine that the short-term rental demand would be greater on Rice Lake than it is in downtown Brainerd. And so I think you're spot on to be identifying that as an area we want to pay more attention to. So I'm just, just pointing out the fact that the counties have that and how closely we parallel that so that we can borrow fairly easily and readily a piece of code language that might work very well for us on that particular topic.
Yeah, excellent point. Any other questions for James on our current ordinance? Okay, James, let's move on to the second part here, which is this couple pages here of other city ordinances. Very interesting. We have a incredibly broad dynamic from basically a complete free-for-all to a complete ban and everything in between. So just walk us through just your findings here, and it seems like we have these in close proximity, areas away from us as well. James, quick rundown.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did try to stick to, some of the surrounding communities, communities that may have issues with interim use or short-term rentals. So as Commissioner Yeager indicated, Edina and Egan, they've essentially just completely banned them. St. Paul and Minneapolis, they've really kind of worked in I guess the last few years here to make sure that they're not overburdening their housing stock, so they've done percentages. You're only allowed in maybe certain districts to have this, this number of percentage of housing dedicated short-term rentals. St. Paul had a regulation where you're not allowed to operate more than one short-term rental in the city as an owner. And then, a lot of cities, I'd say it's kind of a mix between whether an interim use permit's required or whether it's just an administrative permit by administration. The one that kind of caught my eye with it was Duluth. They separated into different kind of classifications of short-term rentals. I did find that pretty interesting. There's the accessory home share, which would be maybe it's part of an accessory dwelling unit that's on the property that you live at. Maybe it's part of your home that's dedicated to a short-term rental. In Duluth, there's no cap in the number of the city for that type of allowance. Then there's the accessory vacation dwelling, which cannot exceed 21 calendar days rented in 1 year. Again, the city doesn't cap something like that, so that might be your vacation home or your home that you want to rent out to supplement some income. And then there's a vacation dwelling unit that's simply bought as a short-term rental, and that's the only use. In there, the city of Duluth does cap a certain percentage to that type of short-term rental. East Gull Lake, kind of a neighboring one as well, they limit, they do an annual permit. Properties may not be rented or leased to more than one separate party 6 times in a 12-month period. Properties may not be leased or rented to more than one separate party in a 7-day period, so they have restrictions as well. So with that, I can certainly answer any questions. Staff opinion, I think maybe separating the way Duluth is could be an option, but certainly can answer any questions.
Very good. Any questions for James on this second part?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
James, for the Duluth vacation dwelling units, do you have a sense of what that defined percentage is? Is it a 4%? Is it a 10%? Is it a 8.675%?
I can't remember the percentage offhand, but when you look at there are some cities that had a 4% cap. I think I did see that in a few municipalities.
Harbors, yeah.
Yep. So, 4% of a city of that size is still quite a few vacation dwelling units.
Very good. I have a question if no one else does. Anyone else have a question for James? Okay, so what comes to my mind, I think there are really, really viable options in this middle group, that everything from night count to density to all of these different algorithms and metrics of how you could do it. What I come back to is, how in the heck are we going to manage this? How is our staff, which is, we know that we are basically a complaint-based enforcement mindset generally, how, and this is a question for you, James, but just say hypothetically we adopted this Duluth system, which is not simple, right? How in the world would we as a city make sure that that is being executed on a daily basis? And give me a score on from 1 to 10, from hard to easy, and the time that we would have into making sure that these are following the rules.
So I think it's something that we would have them, submit documentation. We'd be checking in on their rentals kind of a month. We can see which ones are blocked out and kind of how many days they're using these. I'm already envisioning, if there are changes, that this would be maybe taken over more by the building department because they're the ones that do the rental housing as well. Certainly the planning zoning, it kind of takes care of the interim use permit side of it, but the actual regulation enforcement of these would maybe be more on the housing side. I think, certainly we do have the capacity to do some of the checks right now. We have, maybe 6 to 8 of them in our community right now, so something like that's certainly manageable, but if we had no cap and it got to be 200, we'd maybe have a different discussion on something like that.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Maybe a comment on that. So in the current ordinance that James handed out on number 9, that permit holder report to the zoning administrator has a lot of the information you would need. And so this is truth in reporting issue. But also you could simply add the term of the rental. And then you get at some of the Duluth numbers here about how many days were blocked out. Finance, you got to submit tax information to the finance director, right?
That's correct.
So there's another intersect of staff process that we already have in place in a way, or requirement in our ordinance or related to our ordinance. So you can kind of tease those things out, so. There are ways without necessarily adding burden to pick through, but if you're going to go knock on a door and count heads, it's just the birthday party today. We only have this many people staying,
right?
But we're running a little late with the party,
right?
Right. So I do think there are mechanisms here that you wouldn't have to create a whole new bureaucratic process in order to be able to get at those really important questions. But whether that's an appropriate set of controls for Brainerd's another question. But.
Very good.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Just a general comment. I really see the short-term housing, the people who are behind it. It's like a business model that's happened. It's a business that's happening in our neighborhoods, and I just don't know how positive for the neighborhoods it is. And I think we saw that tonight with some of the testimony. I like the idea of 4%. I don't know what 4% means in Brainerd, but I like the idea of you have a limit, because otherwise I just see us losing more housing stock and the type of housing stock that builds community. There's a difference between having somebody occupying a house and somebody occupying a house and they're invested in the town, you're invested in your community, they'll participate in your community, hopefully, and between that and just having Airbnbs coming in and taking advantage of good property deals and slowly eating apart neighborhoods. So I would like to see a limit on it, and I don't know what the limit is, but that's my viewpoint on it. I'd like to see it as a limited option moving forward.
Very good. Thank you. I'm going to jump in kind of at this time too and just kind of tell you where I sat on this. I've spent quite a bit of time on this, but what we have going on in our city now, plus we're seeing it in the packet here. And I serve on the HRA and the EDA, as many of you know, and I know what, sorry.
It's okay. You just go ahead.
You want to go before or after?
I'll go after.
Okay. And I know what we go through on, seemingly a monthly basis just to get 1 or 2 or 3 houses built to put into our stock. We know from our comprehensive plan that reliable housing or single-family housing is one of our pinnacle key needs in this city. So I'm leaning towards, or my personal proclivities are towards a very low total count, very low. I'm thinking less than 20 units allowed, first come, first serve, maybe something like that. But I could also very easily be persuaded into doing what many of our surrounding cities have done, and that is just an outright ban on this type of use. Until maybe we see that our housing dynamic changes or our need for these units change. I do see that there is a need for it, but I'm not sure that it's worth the cost to the greater comp plan. That's where I'm at on this. I'm kind of leaning towards way less is more in my book. Yes, please, Tiffany.
I could be persuaded that just no, we shouldn't do any more. I think when we last talked about this as a council, we had like one, and it wasn't a big problem, but I see more and more of these coming through. I would be interested in that limit too, not being like citywide, but having it based by, you know, either by neighborhood or so many per block, or, yeah, I mean, we have other things that we limit that way. So that it's not like all of North Brainerd is suddenly short-term rentals, you know, so that they have to be spread out through the city so that we're not bunching.
With an eye on social justice for neighborhoods, right? I mean, that we're mindful that
That too, yeah.
we don't deflect from certain neighborhoods and direct it to others, but there's a uniformly applied standard.
Right, right.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
What caught my interest in the Twin Cities area is the limits on multi-housing units, so that we're not turning a rental housing unit into a hotel, right? So there, examples here are no more than 10% of units in a building with more than 20 apartments. And you would think that we're all generally excited about the D.W. Jones project at Thrifty White site over here, and they're excited about being able to provide that market rate and some subsidized housing rates. But it could be a simple turn of deciding, you know what, I think we're going to go this other model. And that kind of a control is an interesting one, but if we say no short-term rentals, then that issue is not relevant. But if we say short-term rentals and we want to limit some number, we might want to pay attention to what the Twin Cities are doing with that limit on multi-family buildings, whatever that number again is. And then we could ask staff to maybe help us refine that number. I'm trying to remember how many housing units we have in the city of Brainerd and single-family homes. Do you know that number offhand, James?
I believe rentals, we have
660.
2,500 units, I want to say, for rental units themselves, so that could be multifamily
could be
as well.
multi, though,
Yep. I don't know the number of single-family homes offhand.
The housing study has it, and I just haven't been able to pull that number up, but we could do a quick math exercise to say that how many is 4%, right? And it would probably be over 100, you know, if you applied that number. So, and are you comfortable with 100?
I'm not, but I'm leaning towards way less than that personally.
Right.
I think Don brought up a point too, for me, that's a critical part of this is, when do you cross over that threshold of, okay, now a business is being ran in a neighborhood, which is exact reason why you have zoning ordinances, is you don't want the that commingling of two different uses. You want to protect the boundaries of use. That's the whole entire intent of that. So I would feel a lot different about it on a place, for instance, a place that has mixed use, like Kingwood. It feels different there than it does to me than right in the heart of a downtown, in a neighborhood. So, I'm always just kind of leaning towards go the simple way instead of trying to talk yourself into the hard way. So I'm really just kind of myself more towards just the all-out ban on this. But if somebody crafted something and put it in front of me that was a very limited use and could somehow protect the neighborhoods from a business-type atmosphere directly next door, I could be persuaded.
I think there was, and I can't remember which city it was, that had, you could only have one in the city.
And that was St. Paul.
That was St. Paul. You can only have one, and I think that is a good idea too.
One, first come, first serve.
Well, no, but you, Kevin, can only have one. I can only have one. D.W. Jones could have one in their building. You know, I think that is, although Kevin makes a very good argument just to say no.
I'm pretty open on this. I think that what you're really looking for here, James, is a basic feel from us on kind of what we'd like to see, and then we begin to draft some potential ordinance language, right?
Yep, so with that, and we'll kind of talk about the itinerary next, it seems like this is the one that we'll be, working on and tackling right now as our next ordinance to look at. So I think I have enough direction to, craft a draft ordinance. We certainly wouldn't be ready for a public hearing or anything like that. You could certainly take a look at the draft ordinance, we could build on it, or you take a look at the draft ordinance and say, this just isn't gonna work, and we do wanna just ban short-term rentals. So that seems like maybe the approach is look at the draft ordinance and then decide from there.
Perfect. And I think I can give you just a little bit further help here, James. I'll just allow anybody to speak up. It's kind of what they see or what they think might be the right number, whether it be 4%. And if you're not comfortable, sticking your neck out and throwing out a number right now, but I'm just trying to give James as good a direction as possible on how to craft a basic starting ordinance here. And I'll start by saying that I think the number should be very low, probably 20 units total in the city is what I see as a total, and fairly low density, and I think we should protect the neighborhoods at the same time. So I see the units, a low unit count, and in the right spots. That's where I'm at.
And perhaps, James, if you could provide us with the number of single-family homes, and maybe the parallel figure is the number of dwelling units. So there's two different numbers, so you might have apartments and things like that would be multifamily homes and things. But it'd be helpful to look at that number and then say how many, because the concern is not that people are coming here to have fun. The concern is that we're removing housing stock for temporary residencies when we have an overwhelming demand for more housing in the city. And so what does it look like to give away 20 units? Is it a big deal, comparatively speaking? And then the other part of that is to say that, if I'm a homeowner choosing to do this option, and I'm not allowed to do it, and I can't afford my house anymore at that point, right? Does that affect our decision-making at all, that someone can no longer afford to keep a house because their mortgage payments and perhaps their income is based on that short-term rental? So I don't know. I mean, it's another layer to it. And you might argue that, well, that means that the house will probably go up for sale and it'll be available for
And
sale.
rotates back into the stock and the cycle of dwelling, right? It'd be great also if you could break it apart by T and 2, T and 1, and so if we could get the house count and we could get it broken apart by zoning district, that would be really, just kidding. It would actually be useful, but, because I'd like to know how many if we say how many, I want to know where they want to go too, but anyways. Anybody else? Yes, please, James.
How will this end up affecting current PUDs and overlay districts?
I believe, unless I'm wrong, James, you can correct me, but I believe that we could, if we pass this as an ordinance, we could make this proactive within a certain time frame to actually go back and recapture the ones we've already granted. And
Yep,
then they would need to come into conformity.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's one of the helpful nuances about interim use permits.
Absolutely.
They're a holding place for you to try something, but you're able to change your mind later.
Right.
If you make a change to your ordinance, so it's not like a conditional use permit.
Anybody else?
So maybe just question for the commissioners. I mean, when do we want these answers? Is this get to the next agenda item on all of the projects here, and do we want them to spend time doing house counts now? Or do we want them we're defining the project outline for short-term rentals as the next code review? Do we want to have this conversation at the next meeting or 2 meetings from now, or do we want to?
I'll just speak here. I believe that we're going to see an influx of these short-term rentals coming, especially because we've caught so many that have just cropped up and have been already operating either illegally or kind of under the radar. All those people are going to be marching into our office sooner or later. So my personal preference would be to try to get this ordinance push, work on it, but,
It's done by the end of the year, I think.
And I would agree with all that, and that's that next agenda topic, right? But I mean, we're asking for products, I think, from this discussion. Do we want them to just hang on to that so and include it in this next agenda item to say, this will be out of the gate, give us the stuff, or do we want to see that first to shape that agenda item? Do you have time to work on this stuff right now?
Yep, so I think we pretty much finalized language with the parking ordinance. Certainly, there might be a few tweaks, but, that was fairly, staff intensive to do that. So I think we're ready to move on to kind of the next ordinance that the planning commission would like us to work on.
okay.
And I'm guessing most of the numbers that we can get would probably be from the housing study, so I don't think that'll take too long.
Yeah, I don't think we're asking for a right to the single dwelling unit accuracy here. We're just trying to get a basic idea of, if we were to take the percentage route, what that might look like in a basic form, basic number.
That's correct,
right?
and we can give
Correct,
you,
Mr. Duval, right?
we can give you numbers for the last 5 years on how many dwelling units have been constructed, and maybe how many demolition permits have been, used to demolish houses. So we include some of that information as well.
That creates the universe of stuff we're trying to now, decide how we address it. So I'm just trying to be sensitive of what the workload is. What I'm hearing from staff is that you could present some of this stuff in the near future to us, these numbers that we were talking about, that would then help the project.
Help us make decisions, or help give better guidance on how to craft that ordinance.
Which be the project.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, all right, I'm good with that.
Awesome. Anything else? All right, very good. We'll move on here, James. Itinerary update? Yes. That should be page 48. Huh?
And just like that, we're there.
Yep, done, boom. Have this in front of council in a couple weeks.
So I'll just go through the itinerary. We started to elaborate a little bit on that. We're finishing up on the off-street parking, which will be discussed in the next agenda item. So staff is recommending beginning work on short-term rentals, and we certainly can, and if Planning Commission sounds like they'd like us to bring a deliverable to the next meeting, we'll certainly do that. The next one that I had listed on there was administrative subdivisions. This, probably could be done almost coinciding with it. Maybe this wouldn't come to the next Planning Commission meeting, but staff is recommending some type of amendment to this. Right now, you can really only do administrative subdivisions between two properties, which includes boundary line adjustments, consolidations, lot splits. Staff is maybe, we're going to look at certainly at other ordinances, but potentially allowing 3 before you have to go to a plat. There's other municipalities and counties that even allow more than that for subdivisions, but it seems like 3 could be potentially a good number instead of having, maybe people come through the platting process, which is a much longer process. Also, kind of creating better definitions for lot split, boundary line adjustment, and consolidation in the subdivision ordinance as well. So that'd be a fairly simple one to work on, and probably could work a little bit at the same time as the short-term rental one. We also discussed building design standards as well as mixed-use development in the commercial corridor district. Staff is still working with Brainerd Public Utilities to see how that would affect maybe infrastructure in there. There's also river to rails and incentives that the EDA is looking at with that. So staff really sees this as probably kind of a bigger item, and maybe good for a winter workshop, something like that. But certainly could be and is of interest to staff to take a look at that, because staff does believe mixed-use development could be certainly beneficial to the commercial corridor district. And then a couple other ones. There's been talk from Brainerd Public Utilities in a few instances about solar arrays. I worked with Brainerd Public Utilities to get a solar array or a solar field passed in the city of Baxter. We currently don't have an ordinance for that, so we'd have to go through that process of creating an ordinance. For an individual property owner, they can put solar panels on their house. They could do like a small solar panel as an accessory structure, but currently we don't have an ordinance for solar arrays, so eventually that's something I believe that we should work on as well. And then still manufactured home overlay districts on there. There's some tweaks that certainly need to be made from that one. And if there's anything else the Planning Commission would like to add to that or elaborate, certainly let staff know, and we can reorder something.
Very good, thank you, James. Any direction on whether our list is looking kind of right, not right?
Well, so James, these are ordered in staff's view, what the priorities are or the pressure points are.
It is.
Okay, so it's not just the next item gets stuck at the bottom of the list.
I've ordered
You've
it, yep,
organized,
that's
I mean,
correct.
I think the off-street parking and the short-term rental, well, the off-street parking was there, but the short-term rentals is clearly jumped up on the list here of things that we talked about. Yeah, I'd be comfortable with the order of this. You know, one of the things that, I was looking, and I'm hoping that our website is correct. Commissioner Gorham always, has, in the past, has commented that the term limits or the expiration of terms of our commissioners hadn't always agreed on the website with what we felt. But to me, it looks like maybe it's right. So some of these topics might be ripe for getting done before the end of December, when we will have two commissioners, Commissioner Marone and Chairman Yeager, I think, expire at the end of this calendar year. So being able to have a project we can manage and bring very close to the finish line would be darn helpful. And so that we don't take on something like solar arrays and get halfway through it, and then the bringing new commission members up to speed, or you have a total changeover in your board. And so I don't see that as a hazard for short-term rentals, and we, it's possible you could knock out the administrative subdivision. So the next two in queue look pretty achievable and appropriate.
I agree. Lighting's not in there. We could always slip that back in and talk about lighting for a while.
We got it. It's scratched out, man. We lined that baby out.
I'm just saying, I'm a little
we could
crestfallen that it's gone.
We could go, well, we can get onto lighting of signs.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Any comments on our list here, guys? Anybody else?
I do like seeing the completed ones.
Yes.
Like as a little, so,
Well, based upon our current progress, working through number 1, it looks like we'll be done with number 8 in roughly 2033. So we got a list, but we'll keep pecking away at it. All right, very good. Thank you. We'll go on to item number C. This is a discussion on the proposed off-street parking. This is page 50 in your packet. James, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this was not discussed at the last Planning Commission meeting. So this was a couple meetings ago that this was reviewed with the Planning Commission with staff. A parking committee was held, I believe it was August 2nd, to take a look at this as well. So with that, I'm just going to kind of go over some of the revisions from the last time that the Planning Commission had seen the proposed ordinance. So one of the big ones is staff presented maximum parking based on the footprint of the property. So it was just kind of a one-to-one when staff had presented it last to the Planning Commission. So to quantify that, staff looked at potentially being able to devise an equation for that, which essentially, and then they kind of split it up into two different categories. One where it's more maybe mixed use, walkable neighborhoods, such as the town center, Main Street, commercial corridor districts, and then one that's maybe a little bit more auto-oriented that could maybe allow for a little bit more parking. So with that, staff came up with the equation of still using the building footprint area, but then dividing it by 200 square feet for the town center, Main Street, commercial corridor district, which roughly equates to one parking lot space, to figure out how many parking spaces are then allowed. And then in the auto-orientated districts, instead of 200, you divide by 150. So as an added part to the packet, I did send it to Sean as well to pull up some of the properties and how these equations could work. So, for instance, this one's Hardee's. So if you scroll down, Sean, you can see how that works. Property size just showed what the property size is. Building footprint area, 4,420 square feet. So you divide that by 200, and you get 22 parking spaces for Hardee's. From a count, it'd be 72. It would still exempt ADA spaces because those are required and maybe not always used on site. But you can see in this equation, you're roughly maybe 50 more than what you'd be allowed. If you want to go to the next one, Sean, we'll just go through a few of these. This one's a Thrifty White property. So this one with the equation, this one's in the commercial corridor district as well. You're looking at building footprint area of just over 4,000 square feet. Again, about 22 parking spaces. Currently, they have 40 parking spaces in use. So this, again, would not meet the what staff's proposing. I'm going to go to the next one. So this one's also in the commercial corridor district. This one's Batteries Plus. When you do that equation, roughly a 2,000 square foot building footprint in this one, 10 parking spaces. When you do a count, there's 11. So this one exceeds the total, but this is kind of right in line with where things are maybe supposed to be, you know, kind of based on footprint. So we won't go through the whole list here, but there was a couple things brought up at the last planning commission meeting. One of them was, what about multi-level buildings? One of them that staff saw would be like the HRA building, where the parking lot, you know, would probably potentially in spaces exceed what's the building footprint area. For an instance like that, staff did include that as a potential conditional use permit for that, where they'd be able to come apply if it's a multi-level building, whether it's basement, second story, they could apply for a conditional use permit for additional parking. And then based on the parking commission's recommendations, potentially considering employee parking into it as well. So there's a few that staff was looking at. You know, fast food places are one of them, where it's typically a small building footprint area, but maybe there's a lot of staff that's required to staff one of those places. So adding, and Commissioner Erickson from the Parking Commission did voice that concern for employees. So potentially allowing a conditional use permit for employee parking or designated employee parking for not, you know, really not to exceed a maximum of 10 additional spaces. So with that, you know, maybe we discuss that part first. Does Planning Commission have any concerns or thoughts on the equation part of it, or the conditional use permit part of it?
Very good. Thank you, James. Okay, everyone understand what we're being asked here to take a look at? Oh,
Form of, depending on what industry it is, if it's in food services, when you have inside occupancy of so many people, and then because the building's a little smaller, you only have a limited amount of parking spaces, I think you're gonna hurt the business.
right.
Personally.
Especially if it's a small establishment, something like the barn came up. We talked about that, right? So agreed, something, you know. Anybody else? I'll also just throw in that the Parking Commission looked at this, and you mentioned this briefly, but the Parking Commission also met and looked at this and was generally kind of saying the similar kind of things, that the maximum is really intriguing. Basically, the 1-to-1 ratio for most businesses seems about right, with maybe some modifiers or some multipliers for businesses like gas stations or small restaurants or something like that. But just wanted to give you guys just a quick heads up on kind of what the Parking Commission thought of it as well.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please.
Generally, I'm pretty pleased with sort of where this draft stands. And again, I mean, we could continue to fine tune. What I'm trying to think about, if Sean, could you pull up the Wendy's parking lot? What occurs to me when I look at this particular aerial photograph, it's not Wendy's, but Caribou Coffee.
Right.
You know, so when you redevelop a piece of a property, right, where they have inconsequential in-house service, right? You can walk in the lobby, you're not gonna sit down. You'll get a coffee, you can drive back out to your car. What would we do in a situation where someone wanted to redevelop like Caribou did, and now, you know, they're redeveloping on a site that has all of this parking that's not needed, and they're way over the bounds? I mean, how would we handle that within the scope of this ordinance? Would we say you got to rip it back down and plant grass?
I think to be able to do that, we'd have to write that into the ordinance. Otherwise, the parking lot's kind of grandfathered in.
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily get us down the line, but, you know, at the same time, you know, you've made use of a building here for a very, it sounds like, if we look at Dunkin' Donuts, it's it's the wave of the future for a lot of these fast food coffee shops and such, is to just don't have a lobby. You just drive people, get people through the drive-through. You don't need parking. You know, the opportunity on that is to divide that lot, right? And then now I have a developable second spot, but I don't know how you would do that, or whether a buyer would divide their interest or kind of hang on to the whole thing.
And certainly, you know, that business would have to look at it, but, you know, there are new ones and new green spaces that do open up. We've had Starbucks in the last couple of years. Jimmy John's and Taco John's aren't that far removed from new Thrifty White. It would reserve those as green space instead of them just paving over everything. And they'd have, you know, considerations of, you know, do we apply for a conditional use permit to expand it slightly? But, you know, it'd probably be difficult to, you know, have a parking lot of that size. So then you're leaving green space development that would be more attractive for them to probably sell and redevelop.
So there's nothing in the ordinance that would guide us on how to handle that at this moment in time, other than this. We would permit a business there, and they would have their model, and they would perhaps be, legal non-conforming, or is that kind of what their fate would be?
Yeah, so the parking lot, you know, it'd be probably a change of use. If a different fast food went in there, you know, the parking lot would be then just legal non-conforming at that point, unless we wanted to retroactively put something into the ordinance.
Determined.
I was thinking about kind of the same question, and my thinking is you would break it into new construction. So
Yep.
if this was to be demoed to the ground, then it goes into play. But if somebody bought this building as is, then it could hypothetically stay. But there may also be a way to craft some incentives in there, either monetary or otherwise, whatever that is. I don't know what that looks like, but it wouldn't be that far of a reach to think about some creative ways that we could incentivize some of these people if it was if it were change hands and you were to switch this back to green space on the back half, you get a break on sack and whacker permit. Whatever, I don't know what it is, but something to incentivize back to green space.
Well, thanks. It's something to think about. What those incentives would be curious as well. That would inspire somebody to divide the lot off and put a barber shop on the other half, or what
Right.
have you, similar kinds of uses that would certainly fit our comp plan for basically infill development.
Yes. And I had also, when we had been working on this, I was trying to think to myself, okay, what if this what if this had been in place 50 years ago and it played out over the last 50 years? I can't really imagine how it would have hurt anything. I just, if it had the chance to play out, what would our city look like? In my opinion, just so much better. It would either be greater infill of buildings, which is a plus, or more green space. So I think the concept is there. It may take a very long time to actually play out in something measurable, but I generally think also very pleased with the original writing here, the basic concept. Anybody else? Okay, no staff direction, just basic.
Yep, so a few other things to note. Did add required parking space for commercial units in the Main Street and Town Center districts. So it's either a commercial unit has to own a spot or lease a spot. That was brought up by Parking Commissioner Erickson, requiring maybe the commercial units and stores to at least have one spot for an employee. And then also, they did talk about retroactively requiring Main Street and Town Center District to have essentially what's written in there right now is one unit or one space per unit for residential in those districts. I think from conversations with the Parking Commission, it seemed like that wasn't going to be a retroactive thing for current current multifamily units in those districts, but would apply to new buildings. For instance, the Thrifty White project, 805 Laurel, based on their parking plan and underground parking, they would meet this requirement of one parking space per dwelling unit. So that was added to it as well. A couple other quick ones to mention.
Let me just stop right there, James. We'll just see, anybody have any comments just on what we heard just on that first part, the one space per dwelling unit? Downtown? Nothing? Okay, very good. We're good to go.
Next one was change language for additional bicycle parking and then also create a definition for it as well. So we looked at dimensional sizes for it. Also, we had kind of capped it at, I think it was for every 10 spaces, you can eliminate one space with 5 bicycle parking spaces. Well, now, kind of for every 10 spaces, you can supplement that. So you can maybe delineate and take a couple spaces out of it. So it's more of for every 10 spaces, you get to remove one. So there's options for that as well. Planning Commission also did have staff for off-street parking in the rear yard. Instead of having that in the off-street parking ordinance, would go to outdoor storage in the allowed use section for the zoning code. So essentially 30 feet from the rear of the property line must be parked on an improved surface or screened by a 6-foot privacy fence. This would, it's most visible in corner lots, but certainly if neighbors complain on interior lots, there'd be, a requirement also to fence kind of beyond that 30 feet. So if you picture that in like a traditional neighborhood with an alley, that still leaves you the opportunity to park on, a lot of people have class 5 driveways, but it doesn't allow you to park essentially across the entire yard in that instance without either having to screen it or do some type of paving. And then the last one that was added as well is added language to require fully enclosed unattended trailers to be closed and secured at all times. Had issues with a few trailers that are concerns for the neighborhood, and and really those should be closed and secured at all times, and this seems like the appropriate place to put that.
Anything on any of those, guys? Okay. Got what you need, James?
Yes, Planning Commission ready to bring this as a public hearing, I think probably to the next meeting, and if there's small tweaks, certainly, those tweaks could be made and then recommended to City Council for their first reading.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Krambick. Okay, I'm going to open up the public forum here, 7:51. I'm assuming do we have anyone online? We have no one online. Nope.
I mean, I can. I always will talk.
Well, if you want, it's open, baby.
I think you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you. I'm going to close the public forum at 7:51. Since we got the, I'm going to take that and run. I just wanted that on record, so with no chance for rebuttal, so I'm going to move on. Thank you very much, Mr. Bordeaux. Okay, staff reports. Let's go Dylan first this time. Anything?
At this time, I do not think Assistant Planner has anything to report.
All right, very good. How about James?
So just want to elaborate from the last meeting that we had with Dylan. We're working on revising our Community Development Director report for City Council, and I think we should be ready to have an expanded report where we're going to be reporting on updates on all of our conditional use permits, variances, and such. So stay tuned for that. So Planning Commission can always take a look at it and see where projects have started, ended, in middle of construction, just so we have an idea where the projects are going.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Sean, anything? No. Okay. All right. All right. We'll move on to our commissioner member reports.
Just a question for James. So we just tried the new packet delivery system here, and I hadn't had a chance to, other than getting access to my documents, but there's some features there. I don't know if it's intuitive or whether we need some orientation on that. Do you have a reflection on that?
So I know some people have had issues with it.
Write on it, right?
Yeah, reach out to staff. I think James has been working with IT on it. Reach out to, IT department or staff, and we can certainly let them know of any issues.
Sweet. Great.
All right.
Pretty easy to maneuver. I have it on here.
Yeah, I couldn't get it downloaded on mine, so whatever. I don't. Any other commissioner member reports? Anybody?
No report.
Okay, sir. James.
Oh.
Nope.
The boil order's lifted, yeah.
All right, there we go. Yeah. We did make it under 2 hours, so yay to the group. We got a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And we got a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you for all your work.